The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover the Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game, our game of the week, discuss mitigating the churn in the School of Gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high-five engine-building games. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, the esteemed Dr. Michael McCabe. How you doing, Michael?
What's happening, Doug? How are you?
I am fantastic. I am excited. We've got Gen Con coming up next week, so that's...
We are at Gen Con when this episode airs.
Yes.
So we're there.
Yeah, we're there.
We're there right now. What do you think we're doing when this episode drops at 10 a.m. on Friday?
Well, we will be in a new time zone, so we will probably be having
good catch.
a very
so 9
light
a.m.
a very light lunch is my guess. 11:30.
Oh yeah.
Podcast drops at 10:30, so 11:30 Eastern.
Lunch is on our own. Usually I'm a trail mix guy, occasionally beef jerky, depending on how the prices are at Quick Trip and Sam's Club and where I look. What will your lunch of choice be this year?
Some sort of protein bar.
Yeah.
Something in that range. Unfortunately, we don't have a Buc-ee's on the way because that could supply us. But I'll have to go out and do that this week while I'm shopping.
Championship trail mix will probably make an appearance. So
yeah, I'll just bring a brisket flat and jam it into my backpack.
You would
slowly eat it over 4 days.
You'll have a Cambo that you're carting around the exhibit hall. People are like, "Ooh, what board games are in there?" Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a rough-hewn leather sack that I hold my brisket in, and people are like, "Ooh, what's he cosplaying?"
Yeah, I'm excited. I look forward to Gen Con. It is we treat it as work for the podcast, and at the same time, it is vacation from our day jobs and not our families. I would love if my family came to Gen Con. It's just not conducive for my family. I know other families go. We see a lot of them there.
Yeah, some newborns. so there's a lot of people. A lot of people got to get their Gen Con in. Any follow-up from last week, Michael?
Yeah, I do. I got to look at my notes. You had me. I was going down a few rabbit holes there. I don't know if you created a curriculum guide for 2-year-olds in Twilight Imperium. Yeah, third edition, not the fourth edition.
Yeah, how to bring your 3-week-old to Gen Con, Survivor's Guide.
We have witnessed that each of the last 2 years. So that's kind of an inside joke, but not a joke. We see that.
It's real life.
No, not a whole lot to follow up on. I do have a boatload and what's awesome with gaming. How about you?
Well, I've got a little bit of both. They bleed in together. Last week I mentioned that I got to play some family games or games with family, and one of them was Castle Combo. And one of the things that's awesome with gaming, and I'm sure you'll identify this with because it happened several times at last night's game night, but just the phrase of "let's run it back again."
Yeah.
And that is so awesome when that happens. And we played Castle Combo, and then we got done, and everybody's like, we need to do that again.
Yeah.
Like, now I've got my sea legs. Let's do it again. And let's run it back again. Let's try it. And
episode 224 game of the week. Sorry to interject there, but
and it's great when you're doing that, and it's, my brother-in-laws I would describe as familiar with gaming, not full-blown gamers, right?
Yeah.
So I would not hesitate to introduce them to Rock Hard or Arnak or something like that. So they know their way around games, but they're not gaming a lot on the regular when I'm not around.
They're going to game when, exactly. Yeah.
And so the idea of throwing Castle Combo out there and then just seeing that, let's do it again, let's try that again, was really fun and is an awesome part of the hobby when it happens.
Yeah, it is awesome. And that game lends right into that.
Yeah,
and
for
our
sure.
game of the week, when we get into it in today's segment, absolutely lends into that. I think you have to have the right level of engagement, fun, frustration that actually makes sense, not just random frustration, but almost like designed pain, to bring people back to that game. And Castle Combo with, you've got those 9 choices, and then you have 8 choices, and each round you have one fewer choice. And that's awesome, Doug. Anything else with that, or should I jump in on what's awesome with gaming? Well, Gen Con, we mentioned we are at Gen Con, and bold prediction, we got an early copy of Fliptoons, designed by Jordi Adan and Renato Simoes, and published by Thunderworks. Bold prediction, Doug, because I know we played this last night. I think this is going to be a hit of the convention. Last year the Gang was my surprise game of like, whoa, where did that come from? About a week before hearing about it, and then you and I are in line for it. I think that Keith Matejka and the folks at Thunderworks Games have a hit on their hand. It is on Board Game Arena in a beta form at the moment. And from what I understand, all that means is that folks don't quite get paid for it yet. They're still working out some kinks. But in the next few weeks to a few months, that game will also be available on Board Game Arena. This was my first time actually playing it in person, though, and I loved it. I loved the game and kind of what you're doing. You're putting out 6 cards, 3 in the top row, 3 in the bottom row, adding up your score. The game is over. As soon as one person has crossed the 30-point threshold, you get one additional round. And then whoever has the high score at the end of that is the winner. But the art, the gameplay, how the cards worked, the actions that you get to take, I just had a lot of fun playing it. So if you are going to Gen Con, that is one that it's got a ton of thumbs up on W. Eric Martin's preview for Gen Con already. I think it's going to pop. I really do.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great game. I'm looking forward to playing it more.
Yeah, we'll get your hands on a copy too, huh? We got to make sure we do that, make a stop. One other quick thing, a little Gen Con preview of what's awesome. I started doing some, I don't want to say getting hyped up, but getting excited going to Gen Con. And people will know that I've been talking about Manny Tremblay and the follow-up and what's awesome for the last several weeks. We cut because we've interviewed him, and he's had some games that have been released. But Fight 5 is his game from Neon Knight that's, kind of a Neon Knight is under Chip Theory that's being released. And if you're at Gen Con, stop by the Chip Theory booth. This is going to sound like a shameless call to action, but I actually think this is awesome. If you buy a deluxe version of the game, which is $25 because the deluxe comes in PVC cards, you get the standard retail version of the game for free. So you get a $15 version for free. And I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to have to pick up an old deluxe copy and give a copy away to a good friend of mine. I'm not going to say who, but we'll see what happens and how that goes. So those are two things where, in our School of Gaming segment today, we're going to be talking about the churn. And I think I'll save it. I'll come back to it there. But there's also some great things when new games do come out. And what's over there? Castle Combo, was brand new to me just a few months ago. And now that's one of those, let's play it again. Let's play it again. Let's play it again. And that is one of the exciting things in the hobby. Could this new game be one that we do play 10 to 15 times this year or 40 times as a family? So
yeah. All right. Anything else awesome? Or move on to the spotlight?
I'm ready to move on unless you have anything else ready.
Nope, I'm good. This week, we are going to be talking about 3,000 Scoundrels. Saddle up for a wild ride in Greystone Gulch, where a time traveler's futuristic tech has sparked a frenzy. In 3,000 Scoundrels, you're a cunning posse leader hiring quirky scoundrels with card combos to crack safes and outsmart rivals, all to claim the most valuable loot before the feds arrive. Each player starts with a unique leaderboard, poker cards, numbered 0 and then ace through 6, and a few bucks. Each turn, you will play a face-down poker card to a slot on your board, claiming its actions such as scouting safes, gaining money, hiring scoundrels, or stealing tech. Hire Scoundrels from the saloon by combining clear job cards with trait cards, creating up to 3,000 unique characters for the games, like a cocky bank robber, each with powers tied to poker card numbers. Bluff to trigger better actions, but if a rival's henchman calls you out, you lose reputation points. You'll crack safes by scouting and stealing, placing tokens to boost their value, but you are limited to 1 or 2 safes per game. The game ends when the day track hits the final marker. You're going to reveal the safes that you've stolen, score points for their value plus any matching tokens, and then add reputation bonuses or penalties, and tally any scoundrel tech markers. The player with the most points rules the frontier. So can you bluff your way to a high-tech haul, or will your posse bust like a bad poker hand? So this game, the kind of the unique core mechanism of it is transparent cards that slide into sleeves where you are combining traits with professions, and they go in together, like the description there, a cocky bank robber or a fanatical banker or a rusty cowboy. There's a whole bunch of different cards that can go up. There's 3,000 different combinations. And then on your turn, you're going to play your...
Say that again, Doug.
What do you mean? There are 3,000 combinations.
I think that's awesome. That's incredible.
But then the other really interesting part about this game is that you have a hand of those poker cards, and then you're playing them face down on your board. But you can lie about what the card is. So maybe I don't have a 6 in my hand. I can throw down my 2, put it face down, and say, this is a 6, so I'm going to take the 6 action. And Michael can say, I don't believe you. I don't think that you have a 6 this round, and I'm going to kind of call you out on that. At the end of each round or each day, then you're going to flip to see if people were actually lying or not, and you're going to lose reputation or lose some of your henchmen that prevents you from making those kind of calls in the future. But one of the things that's really cool about that is I think it's a fun mechanism, but I don't think that it is... I like that it's not as punishing.
Yeah, it's just a part of the game. It's not the game itself.
It's not a thing of, oh, well, you caught me, I may lose some reputation, or you didn't catch me. But it's not a big thing of, oh, you got caught and now you're set behind for the next 2 rounds. I like that it's more of a playful part of the game as opposed to a punishing mechanism of the game. How about you? What are some of the things that you enjoy?
Well, I love the card play and the combos. I really do enjoy that. I'm going to call it the card crafting system, and I'm going to hope that that's not trademarked by either Alderac or John D. Clare, but essentially that layering of the cards to make those characters, and then bringing that into my play area, my play space, to try to score points and to kick off other combos. I think it's innovative. I do.
Yeah.
The points in the game are very tight. The games that we played were close. It came down right to the final few turns when we played. And this was a game that had been on my radar when it first came out, but I had a hard time grasping, okay, so what are you actually doing in the game? What's actually happening here? I didn't quite understand how, the poker cards worked with building out the cards in front of you and the bluffing mechanic. But I think just listening to your overview, it really is that simple and straightforward. This is a game that just, once you're in it, time kind of stands still and just playing. So I enjoyed this one a lot. It did not feel like an hour. Board Game Geek has 60 to 90 minutes, but I do think it did take us an hour both times that we played. What about you, Doug? What stands out to you, and why is this a spotlight game in the Game Schooler podcast?
Well, I love the theme and the artwork. I seem to be a sucker for Western games. I still have yet to find one that I feel like is my Western game of choice. So I'm constantly kind of always on the lookout for that. I love that every game feels unique, and there are, you never know what's coming up.
Yeah.
There are 3 points that I will make about this game, which is probably what makes it a spotlight as opposed to a game of the week. One, although as cool as the creating all of those characters is that process. It can be a little fiddly, kind of refilling that market row all the time and adding new. If you're the person, and a lot of the people on our Discord, you're the game leader, so that's probably going to fall to you. That can get a little bit redundant.
Because you're shuffling the cards in and out. Other people are doing that, but you're having to bring them out and explain. And
you're
there's
putting
some
them in
game
the
management
sleeve.
Involved for sure.
I also think it can be very frustrating losing out on saves. So the crux of your points are coming from the saves that you steal, but in order to know which ones to steal, they have a various, there's 3 different areas on the board, 3 different like map regions, and there are safes in each map region, and they do have a set number of value. And so if you happen to scout out early and happen to scout the most valuable safe in a region, it can be very lucky and swingy that way. Or maybe you scout it and you see it, but before you can steal it, somebody steals it blind. And so there can be some frustration there, especially with the games being so tight that you don't feel like I had a chance or I was in it sometimes. That being said, in the past, we've talked about games, and it's a kind of a common theme in the board game world of like, which game has essential expansions?
I was going to go there.
And this is one of those games.
Yeah.
The base game by itself is good, but the expansions add a little bit more variety to those saves and give them special abilities. So maybe the point value is not that great, but it's going to give you some end game scoring in addition to it at the end. And just adds a little bit more of a variety and a little bit more flexibility as opposed to, well, you lost out on the 5 safe, so hope you make it up somewhere else. And so I think that is if we ever did a essential expansions list again, this definitely would be on that list.
Well, and I think there'd probably be crossover because the expansion is called Double or Nothing. It adds technologies. According to Board Game Geek, you double the Scoundrels. But the other thing that what I recall enjoying about it are how those technologies give abilities that tend to kind of push a direction one way or the other. That I thought helped to give me a little more focus, so it didn't feel as random and just kind of what am I going to do here? What am I going to do there? I agree with you, and that's exactly where I was going to go as well. That is an essential expansion. I'm glad you sought it out. First game that we had played, we didn't play with the expansion, right? But in future games, we did.
I think we did.
Recalling that correctly?
I specifically waited until I could get the expansion to kind of get both of them at once.
I guess my notes are wrong with my log plays, but
pretty sure.
Okay,
yeah,
good. I don't want to get too deep down that rabbit hole of the expansion, but where do you think the game fits best, Doug?
Light hobby. I mean, I definitely think it's
game game.
Yeah, it's not one that you're sitting around with the kiddos and going to have an after dinner kind of game. It's probably a little bit too much going on for that. I think you have to have folks that are experienced with gaming and a little bit more of a and you also have to be willing to. This is probably a game that's somewhat group dependent where you have to be willing to have fun, right? And call people out on when you think they're lying and that type of thing where it's like if you approach this game very seriously, it might not be as enjoyable for you.
Yeah, the last thing that I'll say about it, and I'm not trying, we don't push FOMO here, but the designer, Corey Konecka, who we've covered other games in the past, has basically said that he's left the hobby from a design standpoint. So he's somebody on Board Game Geek that has 97 games to his credit. So it might be one that it is pretty affordable on the secondary market, and even it's still out there on Amazon, Noble Knight New, and things like that. So if it's one you've been thinking about, or if your game group has talked about, hey, should we go in on and check it out? It's got our stamp of approval.
All right, so that is our spotlight this week: 3,000 Scoundrels, along with that expansion, Double or Nothing. So That is our spotlight. Before we move on, I want to remind everybody to watch, subscribe, and like the YouTube channel. Spread the word about the podcast and leave a review on the platform of your choice. That helps us out immensely. And remember to contact us with questions or comments at email@gameschooler.com. Now let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is the Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game. Designed by Brian Bornmuller, with art by Elaine Ryan and Samuel R. Shimota, published by Office Dog. A 2024 release. Playtime of around 20 minutes, but that's per adventure. Playtime with Doug and Michael is like 200 minutes because we get lost in the magic circle. 1 to 4 players, ages 10 plus, according to the publisher. Doug, go ahead and give us an overview.
Embark on an epic quest through Middle-earth where danger lurks and heroes rise. In the Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game, you and your companions take on the roles of Tolkien's iconic characters, playing clever cards across unique chapters to overcome perils and complete quests, from the Shire to the breaking of the Fellowship. Each player starts with a hand of cards from a 37-card deck featuring 5 suits: hills, forests, mountains, and shadows, which are numbered 1 through 8, and rings numbered 1 through 5. Each chapter begins with a story card quoting Tolkien's text to set the scene, like Bilbo's birthday or a trek to Rivendell. 1 card is removed as the lost card, then players choose characters based on their hand. The player with the 1 ring must play as Frodo, who can't lead rings until another ring card is played off suit. The chapter determines the characters available, and each character has a specific goal to accomplish by the end of each round. Frodo begins the game, and players play cards to tricks, following the lead suit if possible, and the highest led card wins. And the 1 ring trumps all if declared. Complete character goals like Frodo winning ring cards or Pippin taking the fewest tricks to advance to the next chapter, with new characters and challenges each time. Also, no talking is allowed. The game ends when you conquer all 18 chapters or pause to continue later. Can your fellowship triumph over Middle-earth's trials, or will the 1 ring's shadow doom your quest? So this is a campaign-style trick-taking game that is cooperative, and you play chapters, and each chapter has a set number of characters. Some characters are mandatory, especially based on player count. And you basically deal the cards out. Whoever gets the 1 ring will be taking the role of Frodo, and then clockwise around the table, the other players will select which character they will be playing as.
The
with
left
their
of
own,
Frodo has the first draft.
Yep, with their unique win conditions. So basically, everybody has a goal. All of those goals need to be met in order to win the chapter. So that's a brief overview. What do you like about this one, Michael?
Yeah, as a middle schooler, I was a nerd, and I really was. And Lord of the Rings and Tolkien was one of my first fantasy event, like many people before me and many generations after me, I hope, discovering that sense of adventure. And the one thing that I come back to with Lord of the Rings, and that I think the movie franchise really did well, is capturing that sense of feeling and emotion. And what I'm so interested about with this game is a trick-taking game requires you to have a sense of feeling and emotion based on how players at the table are playing. It cannot just be mathed out. Mm-hmm. And I think that this game did such a good job of capturing subtle nuances and changes with 2 sentences of text on a card and introducing one other character with a slight different ability. Yeah. And it changes so much from round to round within those chapters that I really like it. We've been fortunate enough to play this with a few different play groups. And I think you actually also got it played with your family, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, it plays so differently when you introduce different people and I don't mind restarting the adventure each time. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I think it's going to take me an awful lot to be able to get to the end of this book. This is one that I could see, if I got with the right game group or right kiddo in my household, taking an entire winter and just going through it and playing it. But I could keep going. I should send it back to you, Doug. What do you really like about it?
I think I love the selecting of the characters.
Yeah,
and
the draft is fun.
And there are some situations where there are mandatory characters, and if you get the one ring, obviously you're Frodo, so you don't have a choice. Well, Frodo needs to win some rings, which means he's going to have to win some tricks at some point in order to try and collect those rings if possible. And I like then, the next person picks their hand or their character, and maybe you're third, and they only know what kind of hand that they have and not what kind of hand you have. And so maybe they pick, I think I can do this character. I think I might be okay at accomplishing this goal. That may fit in perfectly for you with the character that's left, or maybe it doesn't. And I love trying to figure out, okay, this is not ideal, but is there a way that we can make this work? It's almost that, like you were saying, that story and theme is, it's like, against all odds, can I make this work and not win any tricks when I think I have a halfway decent hand or whatever?
Or how am I going
to
win 3 tricks when my highest card is a 3, and I know somebody else has just loaded with 7s and 8s. The key thing that I just want to relay, and you said it in the overview, but I just want to restate it. Frodo is the person who has the one ring. And then everybody else gets to see their hand and draft a character. And what I also really enjoy about that draft is okay, I have one character down there and I know I can make it work, right? And let's say you're Frodo, there's somebody sitting to your left, and I was like, yep, I am going to be Sam. I'm going to win with Sam this round, and then all of a sudden Sam is picked. I'm like, wait. So what's in the person's hand that's to my right? Because I have nothing else. But you have to be pivot. You have to be tactical. You have to pivot and try to make it work. And I think the game does such a good job with, there are some exchange conditions that happen when you draft your character. This Sam must. Is Sam I didn't play with him yesterday, or he must exchange with Frodo, or he has a choice in who he can exchange with.
He probably has a choice.
Other characters must exchange with Frodo, which then, if I'm sitting with a couple of rings in my hand, I can give those to Frodo and hope that I get the cards back that I need. So it's just it exceeded my expectations. When it first came out, I heard a lot about it. I love trick taking. I love Lord of the Rings. But my initial reaction, Doug, when this came out is, I'm good. I've got enough trick takers. I have enough cooperative trick takers in my collection. And yet I was wrong at that time. And 2 out of our last 3 games of the week have been cooperative level trick takers. And this one fits in a very different area than the Crew Family Edition, the Crew Family Adventure. But man, it's still just an awesome, awesome game.
Well, and I love that the characters change from chapter to chapter.
And with player count.
So it's not always the same characters every round. Frodo is almost consistently in there, but the other characters change and they add variety. And I like it's going to be hard to kind of avoid a comparison to a game like The Crew, because that is the kind of the
trailblazer in cooperative trick taking.
Yes. But what I like and what I think is different and why I gravitate towards this one over The Crew is those characters, it's not just a set of objectives where The Crew kind of goes, well, here's your new objectives for this round. Here's your new objectives for this round. This game does the exact same thing, but those objectives are tied to the characters, and those characters are changing.
Yeah.
And it's not just
as you're going on your adventure.
Yeah. And so there is a little bit of ownership of, well, I'm Pippin this time and I need to win the fewest tricks, or I'm Gandalf and so this is what I need to do. And I think that just adds a little bit more immersion than just here's the problem. And the way that we solve the problem is if you win the 5, you win 3 tricks and you win that, which is essentially the same thing as this game is doing, but it's under the guise of, well, you have to be this character now. And that's what I like, which I think makes it a little bit more engaging and approachable than something like The Crew for me.
That's a good point. That it really is. I
also
can I jump in on? Go
sure,
ahead.
Yeah, I was also going to say I also think it's important that the individual objectives is also part of the main objective. So you want everyone else to succeed, but you also need to complete your own objective. So it's this tug of war of, okay, in what areas can I help everybody else complete their objective? And so it's not so me, but then there also is the part of like, but I also need to make sure I get mine done. And I think that's a clever
hit
balance.
Adventures too, where it becomes very clear whose objective must get hit first.
Yeah.
Without spoilers. And we ran into one of those recently where I thought, man, we are playing this right. Everybody's tell me one thing that somebody could have done differently. And then it was, ooh, okay, that specific character needs to get their objective met a lot earlier than what I was thinking, what we had been talking about, know, and we all kind of came to that conclusion together. The other thing that I just wanted to jump in on, one point that I really like about this game before we move into production, some other parts of it, I love the downtime in between, Doug. I really enjoy that setup and takedown and some of the banter, and people who have a game group, if you're fortunate enough to have a game group, or if you've ever had that, that banter that happens when you're done, kind of that party after play. Yeah. And this happens during the game. New characters are coming out, cards are getting shuffled, things are getting set up, people are reacting to what happened, and then, ooh, okay, so what characters are? What are we doing?
Yeah, what's this guy do?
Right into the next one.
Yeah, yeah. As far as the production is concerned, it's beautiful. There's a stained glass style art on the cards. There are wood tokens in the game, which easily could have been cardboard. It's kind of a fancy first world thing, but there's these nice little ribbons that hold the cards in the box, so you can pull that deck of cards and stack out easily without tipping the whole thing over, which is cool, and it just really well done.
And the box is the size of what, listeners think of what a fancy pen would come in. There's a case that holds one fancy pen. Yeah, you could go spend those hundreds of dollars on the fancy pen, or go for $20, get yourself a Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game. I think the hardest thing about it is to remember the actual name of the title of the game. Because there's so many Lord of the Rings games,
and
so that's where I keep calling
Lord of the Rings
in
the
doesn't.
title.
Fellowship.
Yeah.
I agree that I was blown away by what's in the box. It was one of those, I picked this up in a trade, and when I unboxed it, I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be different, because I hadn't actually seen the box in a store or anything out in the wild. And then when I got into it, I was like, oh, this is really nice. This exceeds my expectations.
Anything to be aware of in
Text
this one?
on the cards. That's the only thing. The publisher set the age at, I had it, and then I just took it down and jumped into a picture here.
10
The publisher set the age at 10 plus. So what I would say is, if you've got kiddos who can read independently, they're going to be able to jump in. That's the only other thing. And then the other trick takers just don't work for some people.
Yeah.
I'm married to one of those individuals. Doesn't care for, loves card games, doesn't really do a lot of trick takers. I do. Part of my bias is I feel like if you grew up playing hearts, euchre, shedding, ladder climbing games, sheep's head, you kind of have a feel for it and know how it works. But if you have to learn it as an adult, just be patient for those people that are jumping into it.
Yeah, that's what I have. You need to know how a trick-taking games work, and they tend to fall into three kind of camps, which is, I love them, I get them, but I don't care for them. And then there's another group that just doesn't matter how many times you try and teach them or try and explain to them. For some reason, they just never can grasp on to the concept. I've met several of those people, and it's like, no, it's you just follow the suit. You have to say that, and then there's just something you can just see it hitting a brick wall in their brain that just does not compute. And so if you know people like that, or if you are one of those people, obviously this is not going to be a game for you.
Yeah, and there's a fourth category, too, of people who just devour every trick taker ever, going back 300 years and have built their life around just trick-taking games.
Yeah.
And I'm not in that camp yet, but this game has shined for me. You know, when we do a 2024 list and do some of our best ofs and things like that, this will be one that if it doesn't make my list, I'll be like, oh, man, how did I miss that? Because of the fun and engagement that I've had with it just thus far. And I'm not all the way through the game. Yeah.
What about skills, Michael?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of them, but I've got some caveats around them as well. I mean, I'm going to say collaboration. Are you going to alter that to cooperation? But I feel like this is a collaborative trick taker where you are making something new each round and just having to. I really have about 3 skills that I can't sort out. I'd talk for about 5 minutes. So I'll say collaboration, I'll say problem solving, and I'll leave it at that, and I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, I certainly, this is one I feel like has logistics in it. A game that allows players to manage production flow between the point of origin and consumption, and that idea of thinking out what the flow needs to be or how you envision the flow based on the information that you have, you know, and you have very limited information in the grand scheme of things, but you do have to come up with a little bit of a plan of like, okay, how am I going to get rid of these cards, or how can I meet my objective with the cards that I have? And I think there is kind of a little game plan that you need to set up regardless of what other players have, and then try and figure out how that game plan works while you're playing. And it's kind of an ever evolving type of thing, and hopefully it all works out in the end. But I do think that there is certainly for me, every time I get my hand, you know, and I see, oh, I'm Frodo, and then I'm thinking, okay, how many rings are there? How am I going to get the rings? Do I have something that I can get the lead back later in the game? All of those type of things, I'm kind of playing out the whole round, but knowing that it needs to be flexible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolute sense. That's where I actually am going to combine 2 skills here, but tactical problem solving. Yeah. Based on what you said, I can only be so strategic in this trick taker, because if we lose, we lose. And yes, I know what I should have done differently or better, right? And maybe I'm playing as Tom Bombadil or Tom's wife. Trivia question, if anyone can come up with that, I'll give you 3 seconds. Goldberry. I should have given more wait time. Bad moments in teaching. But there's some supporting characters that come up throughout the adventure as well, where it's like, oh, I remember that from the book. I see. I really want to get that character, but I might not get to that character in that round because somebody else drafted it, or because of the cards that are in my hand. I have to look at the cards that are in my hand and be tactical and problem solve from the time I draft until the time that it's not just leading suits. Sometimes it's throwing somebody a very specific ring card off suit so that they can win it, because this is a must-follow trick taker. So that's that level of tactical problem solving with no communication, but, you know, you can still grunt and cheer and things like that. That I could go on for another 10 minutes talking about those skills.
Yeah, and the other one that you had mentioned, which I think comes up so frequently in every trick taker that I've ever played, and certainly this one is no exception, and that's a group discussion, which you talked about, is in between each round, and whether you succeed or fail, you're having there's always recaps of, oh, I wish I had done this, or I didn't know you had that, so this is why I did this, and everybody's kind of explaining why they did what they did, either to, you know, their success or failure. You know, this is why I did that. I wish I had done this, or I did this and it worked. And I think that is this game offers a lot of opportunity for that, and I think it really makes a good bonding and interactive experience compared to some other games. This is a game that really feels like, when you're playing a game like Pandemic, for example, is a cooperative game, and the game is beating down on you, but you have your own character and your own ability, and yes, you want to win as the team. And so you're doing everything to help the team. But this game feels more of you're putting yourself into the other characters.
Yeah.
You're very much thinking of, how can I help Michael complete his objective? How can I help the other people at the table get their objectives? And that camaraderie and that cooperation really comes through on this as more of a team building game compared to other cooperative games for me, where when you get done, you're like, yeah, we did that as a group and we worked together, as opposed to you used your ability over here and you used your ability over here and we succeeded.
And we made it work.
No, you helped me, I helped you, and we all helped each other to actually win as a team.
Yeah, and I'm going to use that to jump into my final thought. My final thought of the Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game.
Yeah.
Got it. Nailed it. What was my final thought? Okay, here's my final thought. I'm going to send it over to you, Doug. I haven't had that happen in a lot of episodes. I had it. I was ready to go.
I thought you were going to be talking about like that the Fellowship name of the game really creates fellowship.
Thank you. I need to hear your voice, and it sparked the thought. No, my final thought is that brought it back. My final thought is that this game does an excellent job of teaching through losing, and in the sense of, I want to be able to run it back. I now know what our mission is and how our objective works, and it gives me that feeling of being in an adventure, because it's not always going to work out. So I don't know how the designer and the team combined collaborative trick-taking with the Lord of the Rings, but they did, and I'm grateful that they did, because I absolutely love this game.
Well, yeah, Brian Bornmuller almost sounds like a Lord of the Rings name. Yeah. He could be in the character in the books. But if the Crew Family Adventure is the intro to cooperative trick-taking, the Fellowship of the Ring, for me, supplants the Crew as my go-to cooperative trick-taking game. I think its adventures are unique, and they have just enough connective or connection to the source material to keep me engaged. And I think it's just a solid game, and really highlights that cooperative nature in a way that I really haven't experienced with other ones. So that is our game of the week, the Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week, we discuss mitigating the churn. Doug, I would like to lead us into this, and if it's trash, then you can lead us into this. But I'd like to start by defining the churn, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, this is great, because I'll tell you why. I have no notes for this segment.
Oh, yes.
And I came in to riff off of you and just see where the discussion went.
Perfect. I'm going to define the churn as the churn is the cycle of consuming and collecting games to keep up with others in the tabletop industry and hobby at large.
Yes.
And so in the past, we've talked about hype as a commodity. Well, the churn is the economy in which hype is monetized. So those games are just, when people accumulate games, there is pressure to play them. too much pressure can lead to overwhelm or anxiety. So that's kind of an outcome of the churn. But this idea that, we've got this convention and that convention, this release and that release, this designer, ooh, new hot designer, oh, all-time hit by a designer. This is back in print. That's out of print. This is coming into print. Did you hear about that on Kickstarter? What about GameFound? GameFound just bought Indiegogo. Oh my goodness, how's that going to combine? What's going to happen? Light up tables? Where are you going to, how you can play board games in the dark? Underwater? You can play board games underwater? And so that sense of hype mixed with the actual cycle in which games are coming out, and then it's the pressure to keep up with those cycles. And so we've talked about the churn in general. We certainly talk about it offline all the time, especially because we're a boutique podcast where we do a thorough review of 1 to 2 games per week. I mean, that's what we do here. We are unable to cover 15 to 20 games per week at the level that others, and the Dice Tower is amazing at what they do and how they do it. They got a staff of like 7 or 8, and they're phenomenal. We're 2 guys who are doing this as a hobby. And yet, we still, I'll speak for you. We feel that sense of churn and pressure. So that's just where I wanted to start with a definition and jump in on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard because I certainly the hype and churn are very closely related. I think the games can have individual games can have hype and publishers can have hype, but the churn is almost the machine that keeps moving, that feeds on hype, and getting lost in that. I think the part that really stands out to me is when we went to Gen Con last year and we saw the amount of games in the consignment sale and games that were not very old, and the number of them, and that they needed a bigger space because people have so many games that they want to get rid of, and
games that were clearly provided to reviewers the year before that were still in shrink and then dropped off at the consignment store. For me, that was one where it was like, whoa. I mean, I can remember getting that pack of 3 games from that publisher, and it was packaged like that, and it was not sold like that. Yeah. That sense of just trying to keep up. And really, if you notice in the definition, I don't talk about playing the games.
Yeah.
I don't talk about having fun, engaging with. It's that I need to collect, I need to consume, I need to be able to keep up with others, which I don't know if that's in every hobby. I'm sure it is in some sense, but it is in the tabletop industry and hobby because there's 5,000 games a year that come out. How are you possibly going to keep up with all of them?
Yeah, I think there's also the part of, I think if you compare it to like video games, I'm sure there's a lot of people in that hobby that have a similar feeling. The difference, or one of the big differences, is that in a lot of video games, there is an end.
Yeah. Right?
You play the game and there is an end. There is no end to Ticket to Ride. You can play it as much as you want, unless you have a campaign game. So I think it becomes harder in this hobby to determine for yourself when a game is consumed. In a video game world, you have, I've finished the game. Now it may be up to me whether I want to go back and get like a perfect achievement and unlock everything that's available to be unlocked. But you could play through that campaign and be like, done. I can walk away from this game. Maybe someday down the line I'll want to revisit it, but I've completed it to maximum value. Yeah. In board gaming, there is not that. That doesn't exist unless you have a legacy game in which you're like, that's it. I played through the entire legacy and it is done, and I will put it in the garbage or box it up and send it off to somebody else. Other than that, every game is brimming with potential and opportunity because it's still there and it can still be played, and there is no expiration date. And so I think that's what kind of makes the churn hard, is because you can acquire games, and it's very easy to acquire games with the amount of hype and sales and all of the things that are happening, but there's not a good way to determine when I am done with the game. There are no hard and fast things. You have to make very introspective decisions and being like, I don't think I'm going to get this to the table anymore. Or I don't like this game that I thought I might like. It can be very hard to determine when to move on from a game. And I think that pushed up against the games that are constantly coming out is what creates that anxiety, because I'm getting blasted in the face with a fire hose of games, and I still haven't mentally dealt with what I'm supposed to do with these other ones to make room financially or physically in my space.
Yeah. So I want to flash forward in time, and I want to go back in time, and I want to ask you a question.
That's okay.
So put yourself
together.
Back. Hold on. Let me frame it here.
Okay.
Slow down. Our podcast, we don't have any sponsors. We're okay. Flash back to before the podcast, circa
Yes.
2012 to 2015, when you had a consistent game night with people coming in consistently. Flash forward to life after the podcast in whatever future that looks like. But this is a project, and projects come to an end. And take yourself out of, there's no such thing as a review. That is not that we don't do reviews. We don't do overviews. You are just straight up Doug Gamer.
Yeah.
How does the churn impact you then? How did it? How would you anticipate it? Do you think that you would feel it? Is this basically, are we perpetuating the churn and creating it through our show and through other shows, and just is Board Game Media responsible for the churn?
Of course. I think it goes without saying. I mean, anytime that you're sharing something that you're excited about, regardless of whether there's, in our case, it's a hobby and there's absolutely no financial gain or reward for us to talk about a game. But anytime that you excitedly talk about a game, it's going to influence people to say, "Ooh, I would like to check that out. That sounds interesting." So by default, we're doing that, even though we're not getting benefit. The end goal is no different than somebody that's actually getting paid to do the same type of promotion that we're doing. Ours is just actually coming from a different place, but the end result is the same.
So before the show, how did the churn impact you? And after the show, how would you anticipate the churn impacting you?
I guess before the show, there was the requirement of getting a game solely came down to, does this look fun, interesting for me? With the show, my vision needs to apply more to, is this a good family game? Is this a game that more people will like? As far as just casting a net. Now, we don't talk about games that, our game of the week is usually games that both of us really like. It's not something that is just like, but I cast a wider net because of the podcast. If the podcast wasn't there, my focus would go back more narrow, and I would probably be way more dismissive of games. And in some case, to a detriment, there would be certain games that I would miss out on that I've really enjoyed because that net was a little bit wider. But at the same time, it would slow down that churn.
Yeah.
The other thing,
that fear of missing out is, another contributing factor for sure.
Yeah. The other thing I think is that the amount of pressure that gets put on games now compared to, which may sound silly, but compared to before the podcast, is before the podcast, a game could just stand on its own, and the only thing I would have to say is I like it or I don't like it, or it's good. And that there was no justification. I could play a game and it could be bad and be like, oh, that was not something I enjoyed. Oh, well. With the podcast, because there's only so much finite gaming time, and that gaming time is needed in order to provide content for the podcast, it puts a lot of pressure on games that if we play a game that's not great or not one that's going to fit into content, it makes me feel like you kind of wasted time. Where in the past, I would be like, oh well, didn't like that game, and I would move on. Now it's like, this game better be good because I'm spending my valuable time on it, and I need this need this content to pay off. And then when it doesn't, you almost get angrier at the game because it's like, you just wasted more of my time, and now we're behind, and we need to fill up the queue more, or whatever it is. Like, those pressures on the games, which seem silly, I imagine would be completely gone.
All right. So now what do you do to mitigate against the churn? Talk to somebody who's either a new gamer enthusiasm or who's just fallen in love with the hobby and our show and are like, what do I do? There's 4,000 games I need to play. I got to get to Gen Con. Then I'm going to go to Essen. I've got to get all these games and get caught up. What's your sage Doug wisdom for them?
I think the two things are to do the best that you can to play games and determine what you like and why you like it. Because the faster you learn that, the faster you can kind of cut through the hype and focus on the games that you will like. I think that's a very important thing for gamers to constantly be doing and reevaluating, because those things can change as well throughout time of kind of clicking and seeing, oh, I seem to like these type of games. What it is about those games that work? I think that's really important. The other thing I think is really important is to find as many ways as possible to play games without buying them, so that that burden of physical space or financial commitment is not getting in the way of your enjoyment of the hobby, so that you can try a bunch of games and then pick out the ones, or one or two that you want to buy or have in your collection, as opposed to, I'm going to buy 10 games. I'm going to probably have to sell 8 of these because they won't work, and I will keep 2. And the return on your investment of what you're going to get from those 8 games is pretty pitiful compared to if you just went to, a local meetup, game night, whatever opportunities where you can play other people's games. I think is the best way to mitigate. How about you?
So when you say try it if you get the chance, you mean it. You believe it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 2 things that have worked for me in the past, and if anyone, I want to target like the specific behaviors. Look for is like, if you're feeling this way, maybe try this. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of games you have, or if you're feeling a little bit anxious that you can't keep up with everybody else, I think buying freezes or holds are great. And I've in the past, I've started off the year, well, January, I don't need to buy any board games, because when I was first getting in the hobby, that's what I was getting for gifts. So just taking that month and a true hold, the month of January. And then, other years I've said, for the next 90 days, I don't need to purchase a game. I have stacks of games in my house that I have not played yet. And there's something for me, just setting a time limit on it or setting a strict budget on it that does bring my attention back to what I already have, so that I'm not seeking out. Mm-hmm. That has been helpful in avoiding the churn. And then just those cycles are going to continue. Whatever's on the hotness today, it will not be on the hotness 3 months from now. It won't. It won't be in the top 3. Something else will supplant it.
Yeah.
And getting to kind of step back and see that. And then the other thing that has helped a lot is just looking at trades and looking at playing a game here or there on Board Game Arena, or like Doug said, going to a meetup and just seeing, exploring what others are playing, and trying to approach it by having fun.
Yeah.
That I think has helped to mitigate the churn, and very much so. Most of the games that I have in my house, I'm really happy to have them in my house. They're games that I want to play again, and I don't feel that dread or pressure. And I don't think that's just unique to reviewers. I think that comes to some people who are playing a lot of games and wanting to play games,
Yeah. I think, one last point I thought of while you were talking there is because it's been something that I've been wrestling with for a while and just trying to come to terms with is the difference between financial and mental baggage in the regards of games and when to get rid of them. And I think that there is a feeling of you spent money on this and it still has value, kind of going full circle of talking about a game is like, it's still usable. It can still be played. It still has value. There is no expiration, which kind of makes you think, oh, well, I bought this for $30. I should be able to get $20 for it or 10 or 15 or whatever. And I feel like a lot of times in the past, I've held on to games because I was trying to get money back out of it or recoup my investment a little bit. And the longer I've gone on, the more I've realized giving up the mental baggage of holding on to that game and figuring out how to get rid of it and thinking of it more like I've talked in the past of a movie ticket. I went to see the last Mission Impossible. Was it The Final Reckoning? Dead Reckoning Part 2? I don't know. But not once did I go and think about, oh, I spent $20 at that movie. I need to get $5 back out of that.
Which you didn't do because you probably went Tuesday in the middle of the day with the rest of the retired folks, right, Doug?
Yeah.
You're a smart guy.
Yeah.
Found an efficient time.
Yeah. $10 for the movie and popcorn.
Good analogy, though. I was with you.
But that idea of like the amount of entertainment that we consume where we don't, how much money are people giving to Disney Plus or whatever, you name it, where it's like you don't get any money back from it. And I think if we thought of our games a little bit more along those lines of entertainment, it would be easier to give up that mental baggage, which I think bears more on people than the actual, because you've already said goodbye to the $30 that you used to spend it. And so I think maybe loosening that up can help with the churn as well, because you're freeing up and it allows you to just get that weight off a little bit. And I think sometimes that when we get collections that are large and we keep getting more and more games, I think those start to weigh on us mentally even more than the money that we spent to get it in the first place. But I think people always go towards the money first.
Yeah, and the last point that I just wanted to make, for folks who are game schooling and have games in the classroom and games in their community center and their library, there can be a churn there too. There can be a sense of I have to continually curate so that these skills and these experiences for these kiddos. If you have a handful of games and if they're available and if you know how to teach them and you can bring kids into that space, you're doing a great job. You really, really are.
All right. Well, let us know in the Discord what you guys think about churn, anything that we talked about in this discussion. If we went completely off the rails, pull us back in. We'd love to hear from you. But we are going to move on to the high five. Every week, Michael and I highlight a list of games we want to play, enjoy, or spread the word about. And everyone loves lists. And this week, we're going to be talking about our favorite engine building games. This is version 2.0. We did one earlier in the podcast. I don't even know what episode. I'm sure some of them were on the list, but a couple of them are not because very interesting list for me to make. There's not a... I'm surprised that Board Game Geek does not have this as a broken down category.
How is that possible?
So it's like you're kind of going through and like, is there engine building in this?
Right.
And it's
how am I going to justify engine building in this?
Yeah, a fluctuating thing. I kind of classify for me, engine building is a system that I can create in some sort of tableau in front of me that is operating somewhat autonomously and gets better and better as the game goes along.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I wrote down my game fires off and it's fun. So I'm going to fire off something in my game. I'm going to initiate, trigger, and that is going to bring me joy and be fun. And I need to get better and better at it, accumulate more and more points, before anybody else at the table.
It's almost like the mechanism of continuous improvement.
There
it's
you
like
go.
Everything needs to keep getting better. I like that. So what do you got in number 5, Michael?
Yeah, no, I tried before. I just have one caveat. I could have filled this list with games I feel like I've been talking about for the last 10 weeks. So I really tried to bring some new, some different games to this
it's
list.
So hard.
So just that's one caveat, and keep that in mind when we get to the end or when you start tearing me apart and ripping me down. But number 5 for me is Space Station Phoenix. Space Station Phoenix is designed by Gabriel J. Cohn, art by Martin Hoffman and Klaus Steffen. We will never get a review copy of Space Station Phoenix because it's published by Rio Grande. And if there's been one publisher that Doug has been more critical of over the last 5+ years,
their artwork.
But I want to read for you one little note from the Board Game Geek description that I think really brings out what I like about this game. Many games start players off with a small resource engine, which they build up to a bigger one. In Space Station Phoenix, players start with the best production engine they will ever have and proceed to break it down part by part as the game progresses. Their actions get more efficient, but the number of ways to take those actions starts to diminish. So at the beginning of the game, you can basically do whatever you want in this space station. But then the more that you do what you're doing, your options are going to be limited, and yet your resources are going to fire off, and you're going to accumulate more of them as the game progresses. The other thing that's happening in Space Station Phoenix is, it's a worker placement resource management game that you're competing with other players for specific bonuses and to get your workers out into parts of the board. Boy, it is a hobby level, nerds type game, but from the teach to the play to the takedown, because the actual space station also builds up on the table. It's one that I love. I have not brought it into my house because I know I don't have another human to play with. I'm probably not going to find 2 or 3 people to play this unless I want to take that game to a convention, but it's one that I will seek out and play at a convention, at a meetup. It's on Board Game Arena. I prefer it in person, although I have played it on Board Game Arena with other people kind of in real time with videos on and playing. So that's my number 5, and one I don't think I've talked about before on a high 5 list that I really enjoy, Space Station Phoenix. And Doug, it always helps when you win a game, right?
Yes.
So I had the joy of beating some friends of the pod. I know Papa, you're listening. So Papa and Dan, they got crushed, 165 to 161 to 141. Papa kept it close, but Dan was too busy teaching us how the game works. So that's my number 5.
Looks good. Looks interesting.
It's fun.
All right. My number 5, we talked about way back in episode 63, and that is Machi Koro 2 from 2021 Pandasaurus Games and Masao Suganama. Machi Koro 2 is a game in which you are acquiring cards that every time dice are rolled may fire off and activate, and it is one where you can stack buildings of the same type. So maybe when that 5 gets rolled, you're getting a lot of resources and goods, and you're trying to make that more powerful and chain them together. And so this is I've got 3 games on my list that are very simple versions of this, and there are simple type of engines, not very complicated. But this at its core is just building up your system. A game like Bad Company would work in this category as well. But for my number 5, I put Machi Koro 2.
That's awesome. And why do you prefer that over the first one, Doug?
I just think it has a little bit more of a streamlined setup.
Yeah.
And a little bit more variety out of the gate.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I had Machi Koro on my honorable mention list, which, boy, it grew. I mean, that honorable mention list started to have legs. Number 4 for me is a 2025 release. I've got some games that were released this year that I love. Like, I do not look forward to our top 10 list of 2025. And this I have rated as a 10 out of 10 for me. note, it is a hobby level game. This is not one you're going to play with your kids, but it's one that I really enjoyed playing, and that's Galactic Cruise. Galactic Cruise is designed by T.K. King, Dennis Northcutt, Colton Thompson, sorry about that, Colton, and Ian O'Toole did an amazing job with the art and graphic design and layout. And in Galactic Cruise, you're building different cruise ships, and then you're sending them out. And so you've got these blueprint actions that you're taking to build your ship up. But here's the thing, like, you've got to have resources to be able to send that cruise. You got to have food to feed the people. You got to have enough oxygen for people to have on the cruise, and then you have to have enough fuel. So you can't just spend all your resources and build an awesome ship. You have to keep a little prudent reserve as you're going. This is not a weeknight game, in my opinion. This is, hey, we're going to have a game day, and this is the only game we're playing, and you need to come prepared. But it played so wonderfully solo that I just can't wait to get it to the table. I look forward to playing it with you eventually someday, Doug, and no pressure. I mean, I've got it. I'm going to have it here. It could be 3 years down the road. But I really did enjoy and do enjoy this game. And I look forward to playing it with other people in game groups, and one that I look forward to showing off. I had it set up on my table here for over a month. That's my number 4 is Galactic Cruise.
The artwork and the theme of this game draws me in so much. I wish my simple brain could understand it.
You do not be pushed away by that.
It's so busy.
That will it is. But I think
There's
that
so
will
much
fall
stuff going
closer
on.
to a 3.25 over time. Maybe not. Okay.
All right. My number 4 is one that we've talked about in the past. So I'm not going to... We've talked about all these in the past. But that is It's a Wonderful World, episode 102, 2019, Frederick Garrard. Just a great little system of the way that you can get those combos working to fire off and work with each other. It's a great game. We talked about it in great detail in episode 102, so go back if you want more detailed explanation. But that's my number 4, It's a Wonderful World.
Great choice, Doug. Awesome choice. Number 3 was our game of the week back in episode 60. It is designed by Phil Walker Harding, and that's Gizmos. And if you want a lighter version, I don't want to steal any, but I'll just say a lighter version from a different game of the week would be Planted 147. If you're really looking at, it's more of a set collection, but you also feel like you're kind of building something out. If you're looking for a game that you could get some of that engine building vibes with your kiddos. But in Gizmos, oh, shoot, I lost the note on that one. One moment, dear listeners. In Gizmos, it's a 2018 release. I can't believe the game is that old. But you have 4 actions. You can file, where you put a card in the public to your archive, which allows you to build it later. You can pick, so you can grab a marble out of the dispenser. You can build a machine, or you can research, which is going to allow you to draw more cards. And from those choices, and the game looks like a big old toy. You got these marbles. You got like, well, what's really going on here? But once you get in 2 or 3 turns in, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm really just trying to build an awesome engine here, and to score points, because your machines that you give are going to give you points. Was nominated for a whole bunch of awards in that 2018-19 era. We did, I think, a pretty good job of covering the game in episode 60. I've got it sitting over here on the shelf, but I do believe my copy is still in shrink. So that tells you I need to get that back to the table, and one that I think my family would really enjoy. So that's my number 3 is Gizmos.
Yeah, honorable mention for me. Great game. My number 3 is one we talked about in episode 201, and that is NAR, which came out in 2023, and Thomas DuPont. And what I like about this one is you're building up an engine, and you have to decide when to break it down, because you add cards to your tableau that make each subsequent action of that type stronger. So you're like, I want to keep collecting red cards because 4 or 5 cards fire off, but eventually, in order to keep getting points, I then have to take some of those red cards and spend them to get ships and go on voyages. And so I like that idea of how long can you push it before you need to break the engine down. So you're constantly creating an engine, breaking it down, creating another one, breaking it down, and trying to do that as well as you can is the real interesting part of that. So that is my number 3, Gnar.
Awesome choice, Doug. A full board game in a small box.
Yes.
Right? I mean, there's a lot of game in that. Yeah, number 2 for me has not been a game of the week for us because it is also a hobby level game. It's Scythe. Designed by Jamie Stegmaier and published by Stonemaier Games, released in 2016. I'm just going to read a little bit of the description for Board Game Geek here to give you a sense of why it's an engine builder, okay, in case anyone's wondering. And this is from the publisher, so probably Jamie wrote this himself, not saying he did, but guessing. Scythe is an engine-building game set in a 1920s era alternate history. It is a time of farming and war, broken hearts and rusted gears, innovation and valor. In Scythe, each player controls one of the factions of Eastern Europe, all of which are attempting to earn their fortunes and claim their stakes in the land around the mysterious factory. Players conquer territory, enlist new recruits, reap resources, gain villagers, build structures, and activate monstrous mechs. And when I play Scythe, there are always more things that I want to do than I can do. And I feel like I'm motivated to build an efficient engine to let me get out and explore. Just a fantastic game, plays 1 to 5 players. We did cover My Little Scythe on our show. And so if you want to go ahead and check that one out, that's out there as well. But that's my number 2 engine builder, Scythe, and the art that Jacob Rosalski created in that. It's just, I feel like I'm in a different world.
Yeah. All right, cool. Great game. One I wish I had time to play. My number 2 is kind of the bare bones engine builder game, and that is Splendor. We talked about it in episode 23 from Space Cowboys and designer Marc Andre. You are collecting chips. You are turning those chips into gems that you are acquiring, and then those gems have abilities on it, or not abilities, but give you discounts on more chips. So you're building up this engine to acquire more powerful cards and gems that are worth more points as you go along. Very simple, straightforward. It's almost super distilled, but I think it's a classic representation of that. So that is my number 2, Splendor.
Hard to argue. I mean, pure engine building, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually brought 3 games to the list for one because I want our listeners to be able to sort out. So I put them in a progression. I just put the Span series. Finspan, Wingspan, Wormspan. And Wingspan is obviously the most well-known, designed by Elizabeth Hargrave, published by Stonemaier Games, been readily available and a ton of copies sold. But if you're looking for a more, I think an easier entry point is Finspan, the fish version of that. That was the most recent release. And then if you want a hobbyist level, I do think that Wormspan is more complex and takes more time and more choices, and that's Wormspan. But in terms of, for me, my favorite engine builder is anything in that Span series. I would play all of them. I really enjoy what I'm doing when I'm playing those games. There's a complexity in both Wingspan and Wormspan that can not work for everybody that I think Finspan ironed out, smoothed out. So that's my number 1 choice. Obviously, my number 1 and 2 are both from Stonemaier, but I do think that publisher has just done an excellent job with designing and publishing and supporting other designers with engine builders.
Yeah. No, great choice. Excited to try Finspan at some point. My number 1 is similar to last week when we talked about route building games, and there's one that pops to my mind, and that is going to be number 1 for me, and that's Century Spice Road. When I think engine builder, that's the game that I think of. Came out in 2017, Plan B Games, Emerson Matsuuchi. We talked about that in episode 20, and in Century Spice Road, it is you're slowly building up a hand of cards, and you play them. You play a card out, and then you can play another card out, and then you have to take a rest action to pick them up. And trying to get that engine as efficient and compact as possible, so you're just churning through, like, I'm getting these yellow, I'm turning them into brown, then they become red, and then I'm buying stuff, and rinse and repeat. And the better that you can get at making something where you're not buying cards that are clogging you up, that are wasted. Finding where they can synergize together to keep that machine going for you is really fun, and really engine building to its core. But for me, this is the one that I'm mentally engaged every time I play this. The turns go by so fast that it never slows down. There's no AP. It just goes. And engine building in a very pure form. So that's my number one, Century Spice Road.
Awesome. Great choice.
Any honorable mentions you want to mention?
Yeah, Space Bad Company, Machi Koro. Those are just boom, boom, boom. I feel like I've been talking about a lot of talking especially about Space Bad Company a lot recently, but they're great little games. So how about you?
And I feel like the one I put on my honorable mention is Clank, a deck building adventure, but any deck building game would be an engine builder as you make a more powerful full deck as you go. A game like Tapestry, where you're trying to extend your turn and get things, use your machine to its fullest and making a machine that keeps working. So a lot of games that would classify as engine builders. So let us know what games you like, which engine builders work for you. We'd love to hear about that. Subscribe to the podcast on X at GameSchoolerU, and subscribe and like our videos on YouTube, and join our Discord, gameschooler.com/Discord. We'd love to have you there. Next week, we are going to be recapping and talking about all our experiences at Gen Con, so you can, if you're there and you happen to see us, say hello, and if not, you can live vicariously through us as we talk about our adventures.
Yeah, and Doug loves hugs, so just run up to Doug and give him a hug.
Can't wait. Yeah, hug me with your calyx on your back.
Better than with it on their front.
Yeah, well, maybe. No, yeah, we'll see. Thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.